to Solutions Rising. I'm Rachel Branch, and once again, I am so delighted to welcome Bill Schmick to Solutions Rising for part 3, which is turned into a mini-series on the fourth turning is now, and all the topics that are going into his background, fantastic financial background that he has. And this is really fun to be doing this with you, and our back and forth is just incredibly, just fantastic. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, thank you. Happy to be back.
So happy you're here. So in part 2, we talked about discussion primarily around the fourth turning is now, monumental work by Neil Howe.
Yes.
I expect to complete that discussion and then segue into everyday people and how all of this is affecting everyday people and you and me. So, as you know, I'm seriously alarmed by the effects of everyday poverty-stricken people, the disabled and the vulnerable. And what all of this means in our lives, our livelihoods, and our ability to sustain a meaningful life under such dire circumstances. It's all yours, Bill. Go wherever you want.
Well, you should not be surprised, we should not be surprised, that we have seen these demonstrations in Los Angeles, which have spilled over to Chicago and New York. We should also not be surprised that the National Guard was called out. This is all part of the moving towards a crisis in the fourth turning. And as we move through time, we can expect that these kinds of issues are going to increase. For example, I was just told on the way here, I should have known, that on Saturday there's supposed to be demonstrations all over the country against both the immigration policy and the king-making that is occurring now in the United States. So these
king-making, dictator, the
yes. So the king, supposedly the king, on Saturday, which is June the 14th, is there is a parade of some sort, and these demonstrations from just the other side, basically, are trying to take the attention from that kingly ceremony and throw it back on the people that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, these things will continue to happen. Okay, we are clearly, and I don't know about the audience who's listening, we will have people on one side and we'll have people on the other side. And that chasm between the two sides, we can expect to increase and increase and increase until whatever the final crisis occurs, which could be internal, it could be external, or it could be both at the same time. And unfortunately, we've talked about hope, and I'm sure the listeners would hope that this final crisis doesn't occur, that instead some solution is found, okay, that will avert that final crisis. The problem with that is that without the final crisis, the community can never come together, okay? We need, just like the last fourth turning, we need some internal, external, or both crisis issue that will create the trigger for us to come together. Now, I don't know what that is, okay? But until that occurs, we will continue to have this divide in the country.
And it appears, at least from my knowledge of American history, Americans come together when there's a crisis.
Yes.
September 11th.
Yes.
Yes. But this crisis, this fourth turning, is monumental and worse than ever I have known about or seen in my life. And what you're talking about in Los Angeles, here I'm like 1965 Watts.
Exactly.
There you
yes.
are. There's a turning.
That's
the
a
same
turning.
thing.
Yes, exactly. And there's no way of averting it. And it's going to impact all generations, okay? It's a generational thing. I'm a baby boomer, okay? I'm an elder, but Gen X are the doers and shakers that are going to, in some ways, manage our way through this fourth crisis. And the millennials underneath them are going to be the workers or the soldiers, or whatever we can call them, that's going to actually physically deal with the crisis.
But I think the fear for both of those generations is they're finding, and I'm generalizing, reality on their phones. And,
Well, yes.
and nothing against being technically just so good at all the stuff you're doing. But if you think reality is on your phone, the news that you're reading, or whatever you're getting, if you're not getting content that's going across all spectrums, you're not educating yourself.
Well, there's been a vast change in this country socially.
Yes.
When I look at it, I would say that events today, most events in this country, have no consequences.
Whoa, really? Yeah.
What do I really mean about that? I think in this country it began in the invasion of Iraq.
Yeah.
Why? Because the invasion of Iraq blew up the myth of America in the sense that we had no right, we had no reason other than manufactured weapons of mass destruction that we knew and the rest of the world knew did not exist in Iraq, and we used that pretense to invade that country.
Yes.
Feet on the ground. There is where it began. Now, for years after that, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, our soldiers died, our people died, we spent a lot of money, and in the end we realized there was never any weapons of mass destruction. And we realized that it was made up. What was the consequence of that? Did anybody go to jail? Did anybody get anything as a result of that?
I'm trying to
didn't
think, and I
happen.
can't remember the inspector's, the international inspector's
Yes.
name, who was just crucified. That's what happens to people. That's
Well,
a lot of people
for-
that stand up and speak up.
for
And he was
us-
saying there were no weapons of mass
Exactly.
destruction.
There were no consequences to that invasion. And I'm talking not only, in the United States, but the rest of the world went along with it. Mm-hmm. There were no consequences to what we did. And I believe we could date that back to the end of the myth of American democracy, of freedom, of fairness, of equality, etc., etc. Again, during the financial crisis, the same thing occurred. How many people lost their money, okay? Mm-hmm. The market went down 30, 40% at times. The financial crisis went on, the real estate market, it was just terrible. And we all found out that it was a function of speculation, and there were lots of people on Wall Street and off Wall Street that did terrible things, okay? Mm-hmm. And what happened? They were all bailed out.
Yeah.
All of them were bailed out. This was the worst financial crisis since 1929, and there were no consequences to this for the perpetrators of this. Nobody went to jail except Bernie Madoff, and Bernie Madoff was Madoff, and it was about something else.
Yeah.
That was it.
But historically, we have to go back farther and talk about enslaving people in Africa.
True.
The
consequence was civil war in that respect.
But it didn't clean it up. And
No.
what happened to indigenous people? It didn't clean it up.
But there were,
But the truths are coming out, so more
Yes.
and more people know. So that's part of what consequences. The more people that know the truth,
right.
that's, I always say this is how maybe we find fruition for the hope of a representative government and democracy. I don't believe we've ever had democracy in this country.
Well,
But I'm coming from a different
yes, from in some
life
ways.
experience.
But the point is that the consequences, there were no consequences in the financial crisis. You could speed ahead and say there were no consequences from COVID. Now, meaning, we still don't know how COVID arose, but here in the United States, we believe that it was engineered in a biological lab. And we believe that came out of China. But there's been no consequences to millions of people dying from COVID. This is not only US, but worldwide. What's happened is that that all of these terrible things have happened, and they have been brushed over. Nobody went to jail. January the 6th.
Just kind of thinking about that.
Here's another example that what happened was that we all watched it on TV, and regardless of your politics, all of those things were illegal. Okay?
Yeah.
Regardless.
And people got killed.
Yes, 1 or 2 people got killed. But still, you're right.
Damage to the police officers. Yeah.
Now, we the people have been watching and experiencing this all the way up. We'll stop at January the 6th, but at this point in time, think about what is happening. What is the consequences today for you and I and the listeners of doing something evil or wrong? Well, if you look at what the president is doing, all these people that he had pardoned in January 6th, again, they are free. He has a line of people that he's pardoning day after day after day that are in prison and so forth and so on. They are free now. So even the most terrible crimes, the drug or embezzlement or killing people or whatever, in today's society, consequences are no longer available. Okay? Now, I believe that we need consequences in order for meaning. Otherwise, it's just a story. What do I mean? If I go in and I bust into a clothing store and steal clothes and run back out again, okay, and I'm not caught, I will do it over and over again, which people are doing, and then they get organized, because then what happens is criminal organizations then hire these people to go do this. They rip off these clothes and so forth. There are no consequences to doing that. So the meaning is, to the people who are doing it and the people that are watching this being done, is this is okay to do.
Yeah.
Right? So when they see our leaders doing these things, and I'm not just picking on the president, I mean, this is happening in Wall Street, the biggest organizations, the largest ones
Congress.
there are, Congress.
Yeah. Both parties.
Right. All of this is happening, that there are no more consequences, so therefore there is no meaning in any of the myths that you and I, or maybe people out there, have grown up believing.
And
Things like, America's a democracy.
Yeah.
America means freedom. You're not supposed to do this or you'll go to jail.
Well, I think of in my lifetime, Joe McCarthy. There were consequences because there were people that stood up and, have you no shame, and Richard Nixon,
Right.
by his own party, you must leave office. And
Exactly.
that was supposed to be a turning point right there in
Right.
democratic values being upheld and saying, no, you can't get away with this. I mean, this is totally upside down.
So this is where we are heading. This is where we're heading. We're running towards this. Okay, it's no longer, Iraq, and we knew it happened and then it floated off. on a daily basis, in not only in politics but all through our lives, we're seeing this occur. Okay, and it's going to continue, and it's going to continue to everyone. The crisis of this in America and elsewhere is going to get so great that we will be forced collectively, okay, because this crisis is increasing, to do something about it. Okay, now, I believe it's going to be years before, believe it or not, I believe it's going to be years before that's going to occur. Again, I don't...
Why do you believe it's going to be years?
Because I'll give you one example. The riots that we had in Los Angeles, and then
National Guard.
the president put the National Guard in and then Marines in. This, if it had happened as it had in the last go-around, say Watts or Black Lives Matter or whatever, the stock market was down 2, 3, 4%. Stock market was up.
Yep.
Okay.
Isn't that amazing?
No, it wasn't amazing. It's
Not
because,
to you, but...
no,
not to me either.
It's to this argument.
It's like, here
that
it is. Again.
It's here.
Uh-huh.
It's the world today. Why do I need to pay attention to this? My focus is on money, and if some stupid guy or woman sells out on Monday morning because of the weekend, I'm going to buy it. The fact of what's happening in Los Angeles is immaterial. It's not bad enough. It's got to get so much worse that there's a collective willingness, okay, to band together. And we are so far from that happening at this point that that's why my argument is that this is going to take, it seems to me, it's going to take years and years. Look at what's happening. No one that I hear, or maybe there might be somebody in the press, what's left of the press, who are arguing that, look what's happening. The president's sons are going around making all these deals in the Middle East and here and here and here. And day one of the presidency, there was a Trump meme coin in the crypto world, and then his wife's meme coin. Look what's happening. No one in Congress, no one in the business world is even batting an eye that this is occurring.
And the airplane from Saudi Arabia. My goodness.
But the point is that this has become the norm. There are no consequences. Therefore, there's no meaning to that plane. You do it, I'll do it, it's fine. Okay, that's where we are. And what is it going to take to change our minds? What is it going to take in the future to say, morally, we can't do A, or we should not do B, or we need to do C? There's not even a conversation going on about that yet.
Well, when I see the divide, income inequality, and going greater and greater, and everyday people, 2 and 3 jobs just to hold on to their lives, how can they participate locally and statewide and nationally in community care, community involvement, if they're struggling just to survive?
And it's going to get worse.
So it is going to get worse.
Look at Medicaid.
Oh, I know.
What's going to happen with Medicaid?
Yeah.
And who does it affect? It affects the people that elected the politicians that are doing this. Mm-hmm. They're doing this to the people that elected them. Okay? And we all know that, what was it? Over 50% of the people that are going to be impacted by Medicaid are all people that voted conservatively. And this is part of what happens in a financial crisis. What does government do? I actually wrote it down when I was examining this. Okay, what does government do when we're in a crisis like this? Well, they tax those they can. they borrow, which increases debt, which we're already on the road to do.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And then we inflate. And what does inflating do? It takes basically money from the wealthy. Okay. Because if your dollars are worth less, and I've got, like Bezos, I've got $50 billion, $100 billion, but my $100 billion in an inflationary environment buys very little, right? It's not worth that because the currency goes down as inflation goes up. Then in the end, basically that's what governments do every time we approach the end of a financial crisis. So what can we expect? Higher debt, which we are seeing, higher inflation, which I believe we are now on the cusp of seeing, and taxes. Tax who you can. In this case, what we're talking about is Medicaid. Okay, that basically they're trying to keep taxes where they've been since 2018, and that's going to cost money. So what do? You cut Medicaid. You cut the people you can. Okay.
Because they haven't got the power to fight back.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
They don't. Okay.
And they're not getting. They don't have elected officials generalizing.
No.
Who will help them?
So when we have to it's got to get bad enough that the community decides that we, as a community of this country, that we have to sacrifice.
Yeah.
That we have to give up. And that means I have to give up. That means, my grandson has to give up, and everybody in between. Something, everything. And we have to do that willingly.
And I think also the understanding that luxuries are not necessities. You have to identify what are really necessary if you want to simplify to help sacrifice.
And that's
the understanding.
Yes, and it was great that what President Trump said was that, she doesn't need $30. Okay, 2 will suffice. You're saying the same thing. Mm-hmm. Okay. A lot of what the administration and what Trump himself are saying resonates with people. Okay, that's why he's in office. Okay, that's what's going on. But if I look back through all the fourth turnings, the fourth turning was not over until all the people that were involved in building a new system, a new government system, an economic system have passed. Till the point where there's nobody left who remembers the last fourth turning or how to get out of it. We're not there yet. Okay? There are still lots of people alive that still remember what comes after the fourth turning. It's the first turning, the high. Okay, we came back from World War II, we built all these institutions and highways and all the rest. That was, and through World War II and the Depression, all of the way the government changed, the economic system changed, how it was done, all the rest. There are still people that remember parts of that. They have to all die before we get to even close to the end of the fourth turning. Nobody alive will know how to do it. And that's when, at this point, the Gen X will create new systems. But before they can create new systems, there has to be collective sacrifice and then a community that, because of that sacrifice and the pain that occurs, will come out the other side developing new systems. And as we talk, this is a natural thing, okay? And we in this country, we don't realize this yet. In fact, you were reading to me something that I thought was immensely important that Neil Howe wrote.
Do you want me to go ahead?
If you would.
I will, and this is on page 32. Along the way, the West began employing technology in an effort to flatten every physical manifestation of the natural cycle. With artificial light, we believe we can defeat the sleep-wake cycle. With climate control, the seasonal cycle. With refrigeration, the agricultural cycle. And with high-tech medicine, the rest-recovery cycle. Triumphal linearism has shaped the very style of Western and especially American civilization. Before, when cyclical time reigned, people valued patience, ritual, the relatedness of parts to the whole, and the healing power of time within nature. Today, we value haste, iconoclasm, the disintegration of the whole into parts, and the analytic power of time outside nature. Cyclical time tended to interpret change in a fourfold pattern corresponding to the seasons. Linear time prefers to interpret it in a threefold pattern of progress, opposition, and triumph.
Right. That's perfect. And that's what Hal wrote. And here in America, we still believe that there are no downturns in that respect. Okay, there are no winters. Instead, we have progress. The American dream, manifest destiny, the linear progress of women's rights. Okay, that rights are going to improve and improve and improve and improve. Sure, there'll be minor jiggers down,
But they're not improving.
Exactly right.
Oh,
Exactly right.
I'm feeding right into exactly what you're saying because it's true.
Of course it's true, because we're talking about nature. Okay, the four turnings, what they represent are the four seasons, the natural order. And this argument going back through history, I guess since the Egyptians, that this has been occurring. It's not just an American phenomenon. So I get a lot of people who, when we talk about this, because we're linear, okay, and we look for linear progression, that when I talk about a fourth turning, no, it's just a jigger down. What can we do to avert the fourth turning? And I like to say to them, if you had your druthers, would you eliminate winter? Well, some people would jokingly say, yeah, that's why I go to Florida. Okay, but if you step back and say,
I wouldn't.
Nobody would
I would want the seasons.
because you would never have a spring if you didn't have a winter.
Yeah.
So in that way, my argument is without having a fourth turning, you have no winter. Okay? We have to go through this in order for you out there to come together with me. Okay? We have to do this together, and we're not there yet. And I don't know how hard it's going to be before we all come together and sacrifice, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take sacrifice from all of us. And until we get to that place where our feelings about community, our feelings that, that there are consequences for not being in the community, okay, for not working towards a community. Until we get to that point, we're still marching forward into conflict and stress.
And of course, my strong belief in community television and what we're doing here is trying to be a part of saying this is part of how community is. Community television, and telling you, speaking up, standing up, how important that is. And of course, I believe in one-to-one together. That's how you do this. So part of it is bellwether. Part of it is like, are you paying attention? We're hoping the audience is paying attention and can say, what can I do? And of course, the sacrifice, the majority, financially sacrificed, has to come from those who are 10%, 1%, way up there.
Yes.
Think that luxuries
Yeah,
are
but
necessities.
it will help happen to us. I mean, Social Security is a great example that, the Social Security system as it stands economically cannot survive.
But there's no reason it should have lasted in perpetuity because it was a trust fund, and if they had left it alone and not borrowed on it, but here again, the outcome is not from the people who participated and contributed to that.
That's so true. Now, question just on that small but very important issue. What's it going to take to get back to what you were talking about in the trust fund days? Who's going to do that voluntarily?
No,
What will it take to do that?
it's going to take a whole bunch of people just standing up.
And what will that take?
And electing people.
What will
if
that
they don't
take?
keep their word. You've got to get involved in your community.
It's
On the local level,
going to
start.
take a crisis,
Oh, touche. Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. What will happen in a crisis? The community will be forced to sacrifice. That may be us. Okay. Or it may not be us, but it may be the Gen X that will not get any Social Security benefits. Okay. It will disappear. Or the people below them. Or all of us. It will take a crisis to convince us to do something about Social Security. That's human behavior. It's the same thing in the plant world. Plants aren't going to turn from green leaves to orange to brown to no leaves unless there's a crisis. To them, the crisis is cold weather. Okay? We're just as natural as that tree or that plant.
And we're part of nature. But also, as we're speaking today and we're getting towards the end of the program, what do you say to everyday people who are struggling financially? How do they help themselves as much as they can? And what are the guardrails and what are the hopes? We must have hope. I believe we have to have some hope that you can be part of. I mean, I don't like to think that maybe by 2035, of course, I'll be like in my 90s, I'm still hanging around. But I want to see something happen now and every day building up to avoid. You say we have to get the crisis. Okay, I want the crisis to be right now and to start the first turning right now.
Well, yes, of course you do, because we're in linear progressions when Americans are, right? So what you said, what we don't have the patience, we don't have the fortitude, okay? I'm not saying that's our fault, okay? It's the generations were grown up in this kind of situation. And there's no great-great-granddad to tell you how it was and how they got through the Depression. Okay? We're set to get it something like that in the future. And again, the only thing we can do about that is we can have hope. We can find family, work with family, and work with our neighbors. And when I say work with our neighbors, is that if you're the liberal who hates that person next door to you that has the Trump signs in their lawn, figure a way now to get along with that person and to transcend that. That's from an individual's point of view. Okay?
But that can multiply. And of course, I want to pat myself on the shoulder, but I will say in 17, 19, and 21, when I was a candidate for mayor in North Adams, every nomination paper, Trump supporters signed my nomination papers, and they did because I didn't look at them as Trump supporters.
Great.
I looked at them as neighbors and friends, and the conversation I can have to understand why you believe. To just group everybody and say everybody who supports Trump believes that everything, that just isn't realistic. But if you meet people one-on-one, you can have delicious, wonderful, just both feeling good conversations that are respecting each other and upholding each other's dignity.
Yes.
Even if you come from different places.
Right.
And I think the local level has to be on the local level moving up.
It has to be.
Grassroots has to.
It has to be. It has to be. And that's I mean, that I wrestle with every day. And as I said, and I have said, I think that Trump is a man of the times. He's expressing what an enormous number of people feel, and he's right in that respect. The way he's going about it, okay, I wouldn't do it, but if he didn't go about it the way he is, we would never get to the end of a fourth crisis.
But the fact that he's a convicted felon and
That-
all the approach
It's
doesn't
a-
seem to matter to so many people, and that is crisis in
Consequences.
itself. Yes, no consequences.
No, and
the
that's
pardons and the January 6th. I mean, the pardons. I mean, this is upside down. Our
he's
judicial system.
simply a man of the time.
He's an outcome. It's not him. He's an outcome.
He's an outcome of our time.
Yes,
For the
okay.
last 40 years. Don't blame him, because blame yourself, because we created that. Okay?
Not all of us did.
Well, not all of us did, but generally that's what
This
we
country
did.
did. Yeah.
No consequences. Right now, that felon charge is before the Supreme Court.
Yep.
Okay? And I think it'll probably be thrown out. And maybe, just maybe, that the last 4 years of Democratic, rule and taking law and politicizing it, as people have said, there is a lot of accuracy in that, because honestly, if he hadn't been the president, would he have been charged guilty for felony, or would he be like so many other
Yeah.
businessmen and got away with it?
Yeah.
Okay? My answer is, if he hadn't been a political person, there would never have been a felony charge. Okay, so
That's interesting.
there wouldn't have been, because he would have only been the last of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of businessmen that go back to, the steel barons that did the same thing.
But I'm coming from Jean Carroll.
Yeah.
That's really,
Yes,
for me,
but it's
prominent in most.
It's a consequence of the time that
It is.
that he was singled out, okay, in New York, and convicted in New York, and it was in some ways an embarrassment to the justice system.
But that's part of the resolution and solutions are, we need term limits on the Supreme Court. We need them in Congress. We need people to get out, especially, we talked about this the last
Yeah.
time. The younger people, they have no entrance into our congressional
Right.
system. So there's some solutions right there.
We have to recreate the American myths. And when we do that, because all of our myths are destroyed
And tell the truth about what dreams, the American dream,
Yes.
what that means.
today and what
Yes.
it's going to mean in the future.
Yes.
And it may not mean the same thing it did in our
Yeah.
times, where we believed in our myths. There may be, the people that are watching this may have their own myths and their own beliefs. And they may be different from ours. We don't know what that will happen.
Different doesn't mean bad, though.
No, it
Different
doesn't.
means can be a coming together of a whole pile of dreams and hopes and remedies.
Yes. So we'll wait and see. I'm fairly optimistic in the sense that you're right. We'll both be much older by the time this ends. But basically our job, as the graybeards, is to provide our experience and our hopes to the younger generations. Not telling them what to do, but just basically pointing out on occasion what they might be able to do differently. That's it.
And making friends.
Yes.
And adding to chosen families, so you pull them right in.
Yes.
I'm very possessive with my chosen family. Yeah, one last thought. I think we're about to tie this up again, and I know I'd be having you back, but
Well, one last thought from my point of view financially, okay, is that if you're in the stock market, when I look back in the last turning, and in the periods of populism, and say from 1960s to the 80s, that period, the market went nowhere except on presidential election years. And then each one of the presidential election years, it was up 20 or so percent. So I would not look for a stock market that's, you can set it and forget it. So it's going to be tough times, and there's going to be real pullbacks in the markets. So I wouldn't look to the markets to make your fortune.
I just remember when the stock market hit 10,000, and that was a milestone. Up over 40,000 now is just incredible to me.
Well, look at Bitcoin.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
It's another whole, we could have a whole show on
Oh,
Bitcoin. And be careful and know what you're doing before you get into that. We must do this again.
Yes.
I know
Yes.
I'm not going to let you go away, but I do have other shows that I'm going to do. So, thank you once again, Bill Schmick. This is an honor and just a delight to do this repartee and back and forth with you and the knowledge you bring. I'm so grateful. And if each one of us picked up one problem and solved it, imagine the incredible view you would all have of Solutions Rising. And don't underestimate yourself. You definitely can be part of the solution. Thank you.